Hi everybody, and welcome to another episode of Stories of Climate Change Hope, the podcast that brings you a little bit of hope every other week. Well, I must say it has been a while since the last episode was released. It hasn't been a few weeks since last time we recorded this episode with Stephen Myburgh on the 30th of May actually. But then because I had so many things to do, it was basically when Germany opened up again. So, and it was a little bit warmer then, so I was able to go out again and do a little bit more activities with some friends. And then I had to think about on what to write about in my master thesis, so what the exact topic and research question would be. So that's why it took a while to edit this conversation with Stephen. Today's episode is all about divestment and Stephen's campaign. Well, when he was still a student at Stellenbosch University, undergraduate, Stephen and I met during my study program because we both, well, I still study global change ecology, and he graduated and he got his master's degree in it from the University of Bayreuth. And yeah, so I hope you enjoy the conversation and we dive right into it. It's such a pleasure to have you here because I know that we have been talking about podcasts and you gave me so many ideas on what to do with my podcast. So it's really great that you're finally here.
Yeah, I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, so maybe for a start, can you give us a short introduction to the campaign? What was it about?
Sure, yes. So, as you mentioned, I went to Stellenbosch University in South Africa. That was between 2013 and 2016. So in 2015, that was around the time of the Paris Agreement, or just prior to the Paris Agreement, actually. I met with another student, a law student, and we had a long conversation about climate change and how we were both, concerned, but we didn't necessarily know where to direct our energies. And she had heard of divestment, and I was considering divestment. And I think I just needed some kind of push, some kind of ally. And so her and I together decided to start a divestment campaign on our campus. And yes, that is how it began. Just two of us, and from there we sort of it went. The ball started rolling.
Yeah, that's always great, I think, when you have someone on your side working together. Maybe you can briefly explain what divestment is.
Divestment is when you do the opposite of invest. So you take your money out of stocks, bonds, and other financial instruments, and there's usually a specific purpose. So one does it for a reason. That reason is usually to do with a moral cause of some kind. Divestment was a huge driver of the end of apartheid in South Africa. There was a coordinated campaign towards the end of the 1980s, perhaps even into the 90s, to divest of South African companies. So any kind of investor to pull their funds out of companies listed in the South African Stock Exchange. A fossil fuel divestment has really taken that logic and applied it to three sectors, broadly speaking, the fossil fuel sector. So that would be oil, coal, gas. Even though its share is rapidly reducing, however, not rapidly enough. And so fossil fuel divestment entails just getting rid of bonds, stocks, and investment funds that are unethical or morally ambiguous. It does help that there's a financial case to be made for divestment nowadays, with the Paris Agreement mandate starting to play out, and companies losing fossil fuel companies losing ground in terms of acceptance that they will be the energy source of the future. However, I think there's still very much a case to be made for divestment.
So in your campaign, Fossil-Free Stellenbosch, was it more about raising this issue, making people more aware about the topic of divestment, or was it more related to the institution, Stellenbosch University?
We did need um, we needed broad support, and that was tricky. I'll circle back to that, but yes, our basic ask was for our institution, which had 6 billion rands invested in the stock exchange. Let me put that figure in euros. Back then, that would have made just short of 300 million euros, probably, the ballpark. So we were asking them, well, we had two different requests. One was to stop any new investment in fossil fuels, and the second was to divest within 3 years all their current fossil fuel holdings. Yes, so that was it. Quite simple, just two demands. And that's pretty much in line with fossil fuel divestment campaigns across the world. So university campuses are one site of fossil fuel divestment campaigns. There are other sites, local governments, different funds. I think, what is it? Churches, so the Church of England and so on. So a wide variety of different organizations.
Yeah, you already mentioned that you had an accomplice, and I was a law student. I was interested in how did you like come up with the idea with the campaign? So you knew about divestments. Was the campaign something that was done elsewhere already, or
In fact, yes, yeah, it was. So this idea of divestment, fossil fuel divestment, was really kicked off by a guy called Bill McKibben from the States. He was a journalist. He was also an academic, I think, and him and his class, wherever he was teaching, decided to start a divestment campaign on their campus. So it spread to other university campuses. In fact, we were only the second campus in South Africa to start a divestment campaign. So the University of Cape Town, or UCT, had started one prior to us, and we were in quite close contact with them. And so alliance building was really important in this. We couldn't have done it without an organization called 350.org.
to what extent did 350.org support you?
They were very supportive. We couldn't have done it without them. So I reached out to a subsidiary of theirs, 350 Africa, and they're the chapter that deals with divestment and other campaigns on the African continent. And they assisted with everything. They designed logos for us. They provided funding for materials. We created a lot of banners. We did artwork. I'll perhaps go into some of the things we did later on, some of the more specific actions we took. But basically, they were instrumental. They also gave us guidance on how we could approach divestment in terms of what we could ask our university, just some soft tactics that we could use, how we could get the student body on board, and so on. Yes, very helpful.
Before we started recording this episode, you also shared a link to Facebook with a really, really cool video where people can see what you did during the campaign, which looked like a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe you can share a little bit. Maybe the biggest thing that you did during the campaign, or the most interesting.
Right. Yeah, sure. Gladly. Yeah, one of the things I said I'd circle back to is that, it's all good and well to approach the university to say that we think they should divest, but if you don't have the numbers, then it's sort of fairly pointless. So we fairly soon on realized that one of the things we had to do was to get other students motivated on the issue. There were really just a handful of us who felt very passionately about the issue, but that didn't really translate into widespread sort of understanding and interest in climate change. At the time in South Africa, there were bigger fish to fry. So we really struggled to get people on board, and so we had to be quite creative. One of the things we did was have a climate change action week, and we advertised that very well before the date. We put up posters all over campus. We did the whole social media drive, and we had 3 events. So the one event was a movie evening. We screened a movie about climate change deception by the fossil fuel majors, starting back from the 1970s. And it was a documentary. Naomi Oreskes, I think, is the author whose book the film was based on. And so we also had a brief talk after the movie screening. And then we also went around campus with like this wheel that you could spin. And then you kind of got a prize if it landed on a certain segment. And we asked questions about climate change general knowledge. And if people were able to answer correctly, they got a free prize. So that was a fairly gimmicky thing that we just used to kind of, I guess, raise brand awareness. And we also filmed it, so that was useful to have it for the video. And then we also did a radio interview prior to that week. We have a university radio station. The week culminated in us delivering the petition to the administration. And yes, I neglected to say we put out a petition and tried to get as many signatures as we could. That petition basically tried to give an indication of the appetite for divestment on campus, and it was to request a meeting to discuss the issue with them, which we did get. We got a meeting with them.
What was the university's administration to the petition? What was the response?
They agreed to meet with us to hear our views. So we had an opportunity to give our views. There was one member of the administration who met with us, and then they mulled it over, and then they came back to us, and we met with them again. So, one of the main sort of reference points that divestment campaigns use to ask their universities to divest is a list of top 200 global oil, coal, and gas producers in the world. And it varies from country to country, So you go to your stock exchange and you have, you would, for example, have perhaps 7 or 8 German companies listed in the German stock exchange. It's very much a national thing at this stage. So it's called a primary listing. So primary listing is all the companies that are listed as German. And these are the companies you request to divest. And so out of that top 200 list, there were 5 companies that had a primary listing in South Africa. One of those companies was a major funder of a new center on campus. They're called Sasol. I mean, they're involved in everything, including turning coal into petrol. And they also have their aims set on renewable energy. So they were funding a center for renewable energy. So quite handily, the administration was able to say, well, no, we can't divest because that would mean alienating a major funder who's actually investing in something positive. Now, to me, that's not a justification. We know that Sasol has a profit motive for investing in renewable energies, and we were not convinced that divestment would cause them to pull their funding from this program, because they have clear benefit to investing in renewable energy research. So we asked the university to reconsider and to have a meeting with Sasol and to find out from them whether their theory was correct, that Sasol would pull out. And from that point on, they just directed us to engage with the Students' Representative Council, the SRC. I'm not sure what the German equivalent would be. That would be a kind of an elected student body, I guess, like student parliament.
Yeah, maybe student parliament, I think in Bayreuth would be
Right.
Studierendenparlament. Yeah.
And so we did. The SRC, or the student parliament, decided to form a subcommittee, and the subcommittee interviewed us and did their own research. They were in favor of divestment, and they recommended it to the university administration. However, it just fizzled out. They didn't push it. They didn't push the administration. Somehow there was a disconnect. One of the big issues on campuses is that there's constant turnover of students. So this is where societies really play a role. So one of the lessons I learned is that it's really difficult to get students to start anything new, because it takes a while for momentum to build up on campus. And this is why student societies, have a huge amount of inertia. I would recommend for anybody who wants to start a divestment campaign on their campus to really connect in with existing student societies and student bodies, and really getting them to make it a part of their focus, because then it's the campaign or the movement is a lot more resilient. It doesn't rely on one person or a handful of people who may graduate next year. It's actually kind of fomented within the context of a society.
Were you able to do that after the SRC handed their statement to the university administration and then it kind of was disconnected? Was that another step that you took, contacting the other student bodies, student societies, to kind of support the campaign?
Yeah, it was. And by this stage, everything that I've sort of described in the last 20 minutes or so took place over a couple of years, about 2 years, painfully slowly. But eventually, by the time this SRC meeting with the administration had taken place, I had a couple of months left. Emily as well, who was the law student who was running this with me. And so our decision then was to sort of hand the baton on to what's called Eco-Marties, which is the Sustainability Society on campus. And there was, in fact, the chair at the time was also in our ranks as well, Johan. And he really tried for a year after that to kind of carry on the momentum. He didn't manage to meet with the administration again. There was a new SRC, so with its new series of mandates, and there just wasn't a kind of a proper transition. The importance was lost somewhere, or there was a disconnect. And so it fizzled out. And so one of the things I've tried to do in subsequent years is to contact the Eco-Marties, whichever Eco-Marties it is for that year, because every year it's a new body is represented. And it's been very difficult to do from Germany and to do over Skype. I would encourage anybody starting a divestment campaign on their campus to really start it from year one, So, you've got 3 more years to push it through. I would also say, you don't need a lot of people. You can't be alone, but you need maybe two, three, four other people to be really passionate about this, and everything follows from that, really.
Yeah, I'm interested now looking at today. So, was there any major change? Was there any divestment until today? Or do you see any steps going into that direction maybe?
I have not heard of anything, and even at UCT, the battle is still raging. University of Cape Town, they are further along than Stellenbosch. They now have an ethical investment committee that screens all their investments not only for fossil fuel stocks, but also stocks connected with tobacco companies, arms dealers, and they try to pass their recommendations on to the investment committee. So every university has an investment committee that decides on the direction of their investments, that is connected with the financial advisors that they use. And by the way, I should tell you, probably something I should have said in the beginning is every university has this investment, or every major university. It's called an endowment, and it's invested in the stock exchange to be able to reap a profit, which is then used to fund the university's activities, whether that's education directly or whatever the case may be. So, one of the other things that the university said was, well, we can't risk not making a profit because we're educating tomorrow's leaders, and tomorrow's leaders are the ones who are going to fix climate change. And that to me was a faulty rationale. By our logic was that by investing in fossil fuels, you're essentially destroying the basis for our livelihoods that you're supposedly preparing us for. And it's very much a moral issue. Divestment is at its heart a moral issue. You can't accept the status quo just because that's the way things have always been done. We know without a doubt that climate change represents an existential threat to humanity. And to be invested in fossil fuels is to be complicit in climate chaos.
So, was that a reason also why you decided to create this campaign? Are you worried about the future of your children, maybe, or your own future?
Yes, I'm worried about certainly my own future, but I think our collective future. I'm worried about biodiversity loss. Climate change drives biodiversity loss in a number of ways. But the changes now are just so sudden that they are severing so many links.
Yeah, I think especially for us, I mean, I'm still a student in global change ecology. I think, yeah, the things that you have mentioned are really aware for us because that's what we learn at university. And in addition to that, there are just so many other issues. Even like we have a lot of people trying to combat climate change, and there's still so much more, like societal issues that you could worry about. Yeah, but I also wanted to know, was this the first time you became more engaged or became more active by creating this campaign?
I would say so, yeah, definitely. Like I had been on a couple of climate change marches, the climate change talks. Every year there's a civil society march, but somehow that was, it just I felt quite impotent. I mean, the one nice thing about going on those marches is that you get to see how many other people really care about the issue. But yeah, this was the first time I'd substantively engaged in something like this. And I looked into whether it was feasible to do at this university in Germany, but in fact, German universities are not. I might be wrong, but certainly for Bayreuth, it's not invested. It doesn't have an endowment that's invested in the stock market.
Yeah, so my question would be, as this was, I think it seems a very like key moment. So was there something particular that made you decide to become what some people call a change agent, or you could also say an activist, so someone who is creating something new, trying to improve the situation with climate action or this divestment, and
Mm.
also creating something new, raising awareness.
Mm. Yes, I think for me it really was being aware of 350.org and what they were doing. I think I had subscribed to their newsletter. I had been subscribed for a few years, and I had kept on reading up about divestment campaigns that were happening globally and seeing, okay, well, there's been this success at this university. They managed to convince their administration to divest, and they were the first university in, for example, the UK or wherever the case may be. And that was really inspiring to see how, you know, students were having these successes and they were convincing their administration. And sometimes after years long battles, and then sometimes after like a meeting or two. It was really interesting. And so, yes, so for me, that was the big driver to see that, oh, here's a model that's already been tried out and has already been shown to have successes associated with it. And I thought, well, why is this not happening here? And that was really the driver. I think as soon as you become aware of an opportunity to make a meaningful difference, what you perceive to be a meaningful difference, that's the key thing. Being in a position of power or in a position where you can gain power to do something.
Yeah, I also think that it's a really good help if you already have this role model campaign and you saw that it can be successful, or you see how it can be done. And also, I can imagine that after your campaign, maybe you have also gotten the attention of other students. Maybe they are more engaged. Maybe they're doing something different, but
Mm,
this could also be the case. There's so many things that you don't know, like
right.
on a smaller level, what is your impact, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. We had a lot of interest from students, and the activities of the Climate Change Week were well attended, and a lot of people somehow needed needed more engaged. They needed more. I don't want to sound patronizing by saying education, but essentially it is education. When we told them that we were running this divestment campaign, they often thought it was just to ask the university to put, for example, solar panels on their roofs and maybe put out a few more recycling bins. And so it was this painstaking process of saying, well, no, actually, this is what divestment is. This is what it aims to achieve. This is why we think it's important, and so on. Unfortunately, even to this day, this mindset, and I'd like to hear your opinion on this as well. This mindset of like we can change the world one light bulb at a time, set of ideas where people kind of think, well, if I just play my part and if everybody just plays their part, we'll get things done. And absolutely, you need to do that to play your part. It's part of being a responsible human on this planet and paying your rent. But we need more than that. We need to club together. We need collective action. We need to challenge authority. We need to challenge the status quo. And we need systemic, fundamental change. Without that, the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Yeah, because we don't have the time.
We
Yeah.
don't have the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I would say that the personal changes are not completely redundant and they are also important.
Mm.
But I would also say that it's, it's having much more of an impact if you think about, you know, creating like your own project, joining an initiative, and reaching out to others. Because I know a few people who are, yeah, like they are feeling good because they have changed, you know, their own behavior, and then they can say, well, I'm doing a lot already,
Mm.
and it's good that they are doing it, but I would also say is I would also say that definitely do not stop there, you know. Like if you create your own project and you have a couple of people joining you, and just reach out to people who are, you know, who are important in this field, whether it's planting trees or divesting or what else. Yeah, like having having a podcast and talking to people.
Mm. Mm. Mm.
You need to try to,
Mm.
yeah, like get more people on board. And yeah, when you want to change something in the city, then try to, or not try to, but contact the city council or the mayor and the different parties, so you have support and you can show them, hey, this is what I'm doing, this is really important.
Mhm.
And like you're saying, systemic change, and every activist would need to try to get on a bigger stage, on a bigger level,
Mm.
so to say, in their engagement. Like never forget like the bigger picture, you know.
Mm. Yeah, and it's I often think of it in, not as an either or approach, but an all of the above approach. So you need to be active in your personal life, at the local level, at the regional level, national and international. You need to be uh, having a role as a person, as a family member, as a citizen, as a consumer, as a human being. Um, you know, uh,
And then also thinking about, I think this is really relevant, because what you do in, yeah, like consumption, changing your behavior, that's one thing. But imagine the decision for a certain job and what impact this might have. Or if you're not
mm,
want to be, if you don't want to be an employee, but you create your own company or NGO,
mm,
and what impact you could have then, because that would mean you spend a lot of time
mm,
and energy. Because if you like, now I'm imagining, okay, I will get a job and I will do the podcast still on the side, but I haven't really thought about, you know, what will have the biggest impact. Like
mhm.
what job with my, like my skills, what job could I have, with what job could I have the biggest impact, you know? I think this is
Right,
something really relevant if you think about it after you graduate or after school. Yeah.
right.
Not just people who study. You don't
Mm.
have to study to have an impact
No,
and to find an impactful job. Yeah.
no, you certainly don't. And a lot of people who are the most influential. I mean, some of them haven't even finished studying. Look at Greta Thunberg. She hadn't even
Yeah.
finished her schooling before she was making a dramatic impact. So, yeah, the other thing I wanted to mention is that for anybody thinking of starting a divestment or some other kind of campaign, getting exposure and getting your voice out there is so important. Writing articles, sending them to newspapers, publishing them on university websites, all that stuff is so important. Making links, the one reason we were at one stage looking like we might be successful was through establishing relationships with student bodies and organizations and people. We had two climate change, well, one climate change scientist and another international human rights lawyer, both of whom had been past IPCC authors. So the International Panel on Climate Change, they produce annual or sometimes more frequent reports or less frequent reports on how climate change affects us as a society and as a planet. And they were great to have on our side because they were both prepared to be able to testify to the urgency of climate change. One of the things we requested our administration to do was to initiate a report assessing the risks of climate change to their students' futures. And we would have wanted these two experts, to be part of that report. And so we weren't saying, so, okay, so we were saying, fine, you might not want to divest right now. You might not think it's in your interest, but please, put together this small team to write this report and give its recommendations to you on whether you should carry on investing or not. So though they were an asset, so were other people informally, and that they made recommendations to say, well, why don't you meet with this person or that person, and maybe they have something useful to offer you. Just connecting us with it's like they say, it's not what you know, it's who you know. But yeah, I think social media presence is really important as well. We still have, as you saw, we still have our Facebook page. I still post to that now, and people still see those posts. So as you say, you never know, who you might be reaching. And also, one should never be disheartened. There were so many kind of, well, what one could perceive as failures, and it still might even seem like a failure, the fact that Stellenbosch University hasn't divested yet. But you just never know. You never know whether somebody saw something and decided to do something in their corner of the world, or whether it may have laid the stage for something else. Like, I see the university has just decided to start an institute of climate studies, an interdisciplinary institute of climate studies. And maybe a small part of that is the result of them feeling guilty for not having divested. At least in my
Yeah,
imagination,
definitely.
I like it to think that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in terms of successes and failures, I was also wondering, to you personally, because you have been on the university radio, you have been super creative, you were in a group of like-minded people, and you had contact and engaged with the decision makers of the university. So I was also wondering, to what extent did the designing and organizing the campaign influence you personally? Like, what effect did it have on you?
Mm. So yeah, it had a huge effect on me actually, because it gave me a sense of agency. It allowed me to understand that, you know, um, you're a human being who has collected certain ideas and thoughts and wants to see a certain world coming to fruition, and wants to have a positive impact on the world. And you can actually do something. Um, if you believe in something strongly enough, if you're convinced of its merits, if you're just frustrated with the state of the world in this, or the state of some situation or issue, you can act. There's no guarantees of anything coming from that action, but it's so important to just put it into practice, because the more people try, the more successes there will be. It doesn't matter that you need to be successful in the very first thing you imagine you need to be successful in. It could be there's some kind of offshoot or some kind of other result that's important. But yeah, it's really motivated me to be more of a citizen, I think, ultimately. And I'm just really looking for an opportunity to do that. In Germany, it's been a little difficult. I did try to go to some Extinction Rebellion meetings on campus, but they were all in German, and so I feel terribly guilty for having been in Germany close on 4 years and not having learned German. It's really just been a time issue. You know firsthand how bad my German is.
Well, you still have the chance.
Still have the chance, yeah. But yeah, as soon as I'm in a position, I'm so excited to jump into the next thing and be part of a team. The other thing I wanted to say is,
Can I just ask what does it mean be more of a citizen in the sense of being more engaged like in the city, or what do you mean by that?
So I think we have a few roles or identities as human beings.
Mhm.
I think our main role is either a producer. So we go to work, we produce something, whether it's a service, whether it's knowledge, whether it's a physical good, we're producers. As a consumer, we buy stuff. But our role of citizen is really, I think, like one of these plants that's struggling for the light. We call it etiolated. It's spindly and it's reaching for the light. We really do need to advance our role of citizen, and so that essentially means exercising your political power. We do that by voting once every 4 years or whatever the case is, maybe going to a referendum. It's just not enough. We need to be exercising our political power far more frequently and consistently. Some people might want to do it on a local level. They might want to attend meetings at their city council, become active in terms of pushing local issues. Other people might want to join an NGO like Greenpeace or something and go on climate marches and support Greenpeace financially. Some people might want to start an Extinction Rebellion chapter in their town, city. There's something for everybody. I think that's what I mean by being a citizen. It means exercising your political power to ensure that our present and our future is just and sustainable and fair.
Yeah, coming to the last two questions, I'd like to also recommend some resources to the listeners, not just all the references that came up in our conversation, but maybe there's also a book, a poem, a video game, music, a podcast that you really like that you would like to recommend.
Who, me?
Yeah,
Asking
you.
me.
Yeah.
Okay.
What would you recommend? Yeah.
I'm sorry, I thought you were talking to your listeners for some reason.
No, no,
Uh,
no.
um,
Like what you would
what
recommend
would I
me, or
recommend?
like recommend the listeners. Yeah.
And would you mean particularly about divestment or just sort of generally things that I'm interested in?
It doesn't have to be divestment, no.
Okay. Yeah, so wow, yeah, that's a huge question. Gosh, well, yeah, so
I guess there's a lot. You're thinking about which one to
yeah,
pick.
I wouldn't. There are so many. There's so much that's inspiring.
Mm.
One thing that I'm really getting into lately, maybe this is something I can talk about. It's really one thing I'm really getting into recently is rights of nature. So rights of nature is this idea that nature deserves rights just as human beings have rights. Under our current legal regime, stretching back hundreds of years, nature is property, including your pet animal. And that's not right. They are sentient beings. They deserve rights just as much as we do.
Is
Ecosystems.
there
Mhm.
is there a website that people can read about, or any resource? I mean,
Yeah, there's quite a few. So they can go to therightsofnature.org. that is a European Rights of Nature tribunal and a global hub that works on the knowledge exchange regarding rights of nature. The rightsofnature.org is a good one to start with. And then there's a couple of non-profits like the CELDF.org, and they are the Community Environmental Legal Defense Fund. They help communities draft rights of nature legislation. So why I like rights of nature is, and just to bring it back to divestment, a stable climate is a human right, but it's also a right for all living organisms to have a climate that they have evolved to withstand and to function in. We need the right environment, and the climate just dictates so much. I mean, it's literally the air around us, and the air around us means the water around us, means the temperature around us, means the soils around us. So it's literally what we breathe in. So I think we need to elevate human rights and the rights of nature above the rights of businesses and corporations and industries such as the fossil fuel industry to earn a profit. And I think until we do that, we're going to lose the battle against climate change.
Yeah, this is a really interesting topic, and I don't know, maybe it could be a potential topic for another conversation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry, I took it in a slightly different direction, but yeah, it's
Yeah.
all these things
And
relate to each other somehow.
yeah. So finally, I would ask you if there's anything, what makes you hopeful
Hmm.
and what makes you doubtful that the climate crisis can be reduced?
Hmm.
Maybe you can start with maybe
A doubt.
one doubt and one hope.
Yeah, so I doubt the concept of net zero. I think that ultimately it's a question of reducing our consumption, and that doesn't seem to be taking place. Net zero just seems to kick the can down the road and say, well, let's aim for 2050. We'll surely get there by then. Yes, there are intermediate targets. 2030 is an intermediate target. I think net zero, it's said, gives license for us to keep on polluting and to keep on farming the way we farm, to keep on cutting down forests and saying, well, we'll find a way to reabsorb all this carbon later. It'll be fine. We'll invent technologies that haven't been invented yet, that's not feasible at scale yet. We'll just carry on polluting and we'll pay for some trees and stuff like that. But net zero is a completely misleading concept because our biosphere only has a limited capacity to reabsorb carbon. Whatever capacity it does have, it needs to use to reabsorb the carbon that's already in the atmosphere, not that will still enter the atmosphere from burning fossil fuels. So, I would very much like to see a shift to reducing as much as possible as soon as possible. It's important for people to have targets, yes, but targets can also be distracting because especially when they're in the distant future and especially when they're not concrete. What we actually need is net negative, not net zero. But what gives me hope is that there seems to be this quite rapid shift towards renewable energies taking place. And sadly, it's not because of it. It's only in small part because of divestment campaigns, and it's in greater part because renewables are now cheaper. And so, the stock market says, okay, well, let's go with what's cheapest. It's probably very hard to tease out the effects of divestment. Divestment has no doubt played a role, But without the price parity being there, we wouldn't see this rapid movement towards renewable energy.
Yeah. Thank you. And I guess that's it for today's show. Thanks a lot for being here, Stephen.
Yeah, thank you very much. And sorry, I would have liked to have picked your brain, but I guess it is an interview, and that's what it works.
Yeah. Well, maybe
I can pick your brain on the next walk we have in the forest.
Yeah, and or the next conversation, and we can make it differently.
Okay, sounds good.
And thanks everyone for listening. This was this week's episode of Stories of Climate Change Hope, bringing you climate hope for the ears every other week. Just as a short announcement, I wanted to say that, while there haven't been so many new updates frequently, I am still committed to working more on the podcast. I don't have any concrete conversations set up yet, not any fixed dates yet, but I definitely have some plans for other episodes, and some people who are already informed that they are going to be in the show as a guest. Some topics that we will cover in the future include another 1 or 2 episodes will again deal with the topic of how to communicate certain issues like the climate crisis, how art can help us, how our imagination can help us in communicating it. These episodes might be in German, but they might also be in English, so stay tuned. And then another episode will deal, or I will invite a guest who works as a climate change manager. I don't know if you have this kind of title abroad as well. In German it's Klimaschutzmanager, and those are people who advise cities or communities on how to reduce carbon emissions and how to make cities and communities more climate change friendly, so to say. And this could be potentially interesting for people who are still thinking about what they might want to become. In another conversation we'll also talk about how to overcome these kind of boundaries that you sometimes have between different people, different organizations. There's an organization in Germany that focuses on bringing people together who are really from very different fields, find solutions on how to overcome these boundaries and on how to work together, because there are many organizations, also many businesses who are already committed to tackle climate change, and this is a really great initiative that I would also like to introduce here in the podcast. I hope you stay tuned, and I hope to welcome you again soon on this podcast when the next episode is released. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and I hope you're doing well. Bye bye. I would like to say thanks to my friend Coco, who has helped me designing the podcast logo and also has advised me in between. And I would also like to thank my old music teacher, who is also a musician who goes by the name Wolkenrekorder, who is allowing me to use his music for the podcast intro and the outro. Thank you so much. And remember that you can listen to the podcast on all podcast distribution apps. So in case you're still going to the website, you don't have to do that. You can just download the episodes to your smartphone and then listen to it while you're outside on a walk, or you're running, or you're in the gym. Whatever you're doing, you can get inspired with this podcast.